You'll never be as good as your brother, my father spat, his words echoing through his mahogany-paneled office. My father's sharp words, "You'll never measure up to your brother," resonated through his office, which was paneled with dark wood. I stood there, gripping my business proposal so tightly the pages crumpled. I clutched my business proposal so hard that the papers wrinkled. 10 years of education, countless sleepless nights preparing for this moment, and he dismissed me with a single, cruel sentence. After a decade of study and many nights without sleep, all spent getting ready for this very moment, he discarded my efforts with one harsh remark. My brother, Jacob, slouched in the corner armchair, awkwardly fiddling with his phone, pretending not to hear our father tear my dreams apart. My brother, Jacob, lounged in an armchair in the corner, nervously toying with his phone and pretending he couldn't hear our father crushing my hopes. My name is Madeline Brown, and I spent 30 years believing I was destined to help lead my father's company, Brown Technologies. For 30 years, I, Madeline Brown, was convinced my future was to help run my father's company, Brown Technologies. I grew up breathing the business. The business was a part of my life from childhood. Dinner conversations revolved around market strategies, and my weekends were spent shadowing department heads. Instead of playing with friends, dinner discussions were about market tactics, and instead of having fun with my friends, I spent my weekends observing various department leaders, unlike Jacob, who'd rather be anywhere else. I lived and breathed the industry. I was completely passionate about the industry, a stark contrast to Jacob, who would have preferred to be anywhere else. I'd done everything right. Top of my class at business school, internships at leading tech firms, even learned Mandarin to help with our Asian market expansion. I had done everything expected of me. I graduated at the top of my business school class, completed internships at major tech companies, and even learned Mandarin to assist with our expansion in Asia. But standing in my father's office that day, none of it mattered. Yet, standing in my father's office on that particular day, all of my accomplishments were meaningless. The only thing he saw when he looked at me was his daughter, someone to be married off, not trusted with his legacy. When he looked at me, he saw only a daughter to be married, not someone capable of inheriting his company's legacy. "Dad, just look at my proposal," I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. "The market analysis shows." "Please, Dad, just look at my proposal," I begged, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "The market data indicates." "Enough?" He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. "I've already decided. Jacob will take over as cool next month. You should focus on finding a good husband. That's what your mother and I want for you." "That's enough," he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "I've made up my mind. Jacob is becoming cool next month. You and your mother should be thinking about finding you a suitable husband." I glanced at my brother, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. I looked at my brother, who at least had the good sense to appear uneasy. Jacob was 27, had barely passed his business classes, and spent more time on his golf swing than in the office. Jacob, who was 27, had just barely scraped by in his business courses and dedicated more time to golf than his job. But he had the one qualification that mattered to my father. He was the son But he possessed the single quality my father valued most. He was the male heir, the familiar ache of being overlooked burned in my chest. But this time, something was different. The usual pain of being ignored flared up inside me, but this time, there was a new feeling mixed in with it. Maybe it was the way my father smirked when he mentioned finding a husband, or how he didn't even bother looking at the proposal I'd spent months perfecting. Perhaps it was the subtle smirk on his face when he mentioned marriage, or the fact that he didn't even glance at the proposal I had spent months perfecting. A strange calm settled over me as I realized that no matter what I achieved, nothing would ever be enough for him. A sudden sense of peace washed over me as I understood that my achievements would never be sufficient to earn his approval. "You're right," I said quietly, smoothing the crumpled pages of my proposal. "I should focus on my future." "You're right," I said softly, as I flattened the wrinkled papers of my proposal. "I need to focus on what's next for me." My father looked up, surprised by my sudden agreement. My father seemed taken aback by my quick acceptance. I placed the document on his desk, turned around, and walked out of his office. I placed the document on his desk, spun around, and left. His office behind me. I heard him chuckle, probably thinking he'd finally gotten through to me. I heard a chuckle behind me, likely him believing he had finally gotten his point across to me. He had no idea that I was declaring war. He didn't realize I wasn't giving up. I was beginning a battle. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by industry reports and market analysis I'd gathered over the years. Later that evening, I was in my apartment, surrounded by years' worth of industry data and market research. Everything I knew about Brown Technologies was spread across my dining room table: supplier contacts, distribution networks, customer pain points. My dining room table was covered with all the knowledge I had of Brown Technologies, supplier information, distribution channels, and customer problems. Information that most people would kill to have, handed to me simply because no one thought I'd ever use it against them. Was valuable information that I was given because no one imagined I would ever use it as a weapon against the company. Taking an interest in the family business is fine for a hobby, my father had always said with that condescending smile. It's cute that you want to learn. With his usual patronizing smile, my father had always told me, it's a nice little hobby for you to take an interest in the family business. It's sweet that you want to learn. Each dismissive comment had only driven me to study harder, dig deeper. Every one of his dismissive remarks only pushed me to work and learn even harder. Now, all that knowledge felt like ammunition. Now, all that information felt like weapons for a fight. My phone buzzed. Another message from my mother. My phone vibrated with another text from my mother. Your father means well, she wrote. He just wants to protect you from the stress. Your father has good intentions, she wrote. He's only trying to shield you from a lot of stress. I turned off my phone without replying. I shut off my phone without sending a response. My mother had always tried to play peacemaker, smoothing over my father's harsh words with gentle excuses, but she'd never once stood up to him, never challenged his outdated views. My mother had always been the one to try to make peace, excusing my father's cruel remarks, but she had never once challenged his old-fashioned beliefs. The next morning, I walked into Brown Technologies for what I knew would be the last time. I entered Brown Technologies the next day, certain it would be my final time there. As I packed up my desk in the marketing department, my colleagues avoided eye contact. As I packed my things in the marketing department. My coworkers avoided looking at me. News traveled fast in family companies. In a family-run company, news spreads quickly. Everyone knew about yesterday's meeting, about how Walter Brown's ambitious daughter had finally been put in her place. The whole company knew about the meeting from the previous day, about how Walter Brown's driven daughter had finally been defeated. "I'm sorry, Maddie," Lisa from accounting whispered as she passed by. "We all know you deserved that position." "I'm so sorry, Maddie," Lisa from accounting whispered to me as she walked by. "We all agree you should have gotten that job." Her sympathy made it worse somehow. For some reason, her sympathy made the situation feel even worse. How many others had watched me work twice as hard as Jacob, only to be pushed aside because I was born the wrong gender? How many other people had seen me work twice as hard as Jacob, only to be dismissed because I was female? I was nearly finished packing when my brother appeared in my doorway. My brother showed up in the doorway, just as I was finishing packing. He said, shifting uncomfortably. "Dad says you're taking some time off to think about your priorities." "Hey," he said, looking uneasy. "Dad told me you're taking a break to think about what's important to you." "That's one way to put it," I replied, closing my laptop bag with more force than necessary. "You could say that," I said, snapping my laptop bag shut a little too forcefully. "Look, I know you're upset, but maybe it's for the best. Running a company is really stressful and ... Listen, I get that you're mad, but maybe this is a good thing. Being in charge of a company is super stressful and..." "Save it, Jacob." I cut him off. "We both know you don't want this job, but you'll take it because it's easier than standing up to him." "Stop, Jacob," I interrupted. "We both know you don't want this position, but you're taking it because it's simpler than confronting him." My brother flinched at the truth in my words. My brother winced because he knew what I was saying was true. As I walked out of the building, carrying my small box of belongings, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. I saw my own reflection in the glass doors as I left the building, carrying a small box of my things. I looked different, somehow, lighter, as if putting down the weight of my father's approval had physically transformed me. I looked changed, somehow lighter, as if letting go of my need for my father's approval had literally transformed me. One thought kept running through my mind. They had no idea what I was capable of. One thought kept repeating in my head. They had no clue what I was going to do. Next, the decision to leave the country came surprisingly easily. Deciding to leave the country was unexpectedly simple. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn my place in my father's world. Now, it was time to build my own. I had spent my whole life trying to fit into my father's world. Now, it was time for me to create my own. Within weeks, I'd liquidated my trust fund, the one thing my father couldn't control, signed a lease for an office space in Singapore, and booked a one-way flight. In just a few weeks, I cashed out my trust fund, the only asset my father couldn't touch, rented an office in Singapore, and bought a one-way plane ticket. My mother's reaction was predictably dramatic. My mother reacted exactly as I expected, with a lot of drama. "How can you abandon your family like this?" she sobbed over the phone. "Your father will never forgive you." "How could you leave your family this way?" she cried on the phone. "Your father will never be able to forgive you." I almost laughed at that. Forgiveness implied I'd done something wrong, and for the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain I hadn't. I nearly laughed at the idea. Forgiveness is for when you've done something wrong, and for the first time, I was completely sure I hadn't. The real surprise came from my grandmother, my father's mother. The biggest surprise, however, was from my grandmother, my father's mother. She showed up at my apartment the night before I left, her small frame radiating determination. She came to my apartment the night before I left, and her small size was full of resolve. "Your grandfather would have been ashamed," she said, "but not in the way I expected." "Your grandfather would have been ashamed," she told me, "but not for the reason I thought." "Ashamed of what your father has become?" The company was built on innovation, not tradition. "Ashamed of the man your father has become." This company was founded on new ideas, not old customs. She pressed a thick envelope into my hands. She pushed a thick envelope into my hands. Inside was everything I needed to know about my grandfather's original vision for Brown Technologies, including his personal journals and early business plans. Inside were all the details of my grandfather's initial vision for Brown Technologies, including his personal notes and early business strategies. He always said the future belongs to those brave enough to create it, my grandmother told me. Show them what that means. He always used to say that the future is for those with the courage to make it, my grandmother explained. Go show them what that looks like. The first months in Singapore were a blur of meetings, coding sessions, and sleepless nights. The first few months in Singapore passed in a daze of meetings, coding, and staying up late. I'd identified the biggest weakness in my father's business model, their outdated approach to supply chain management. I had pinpointed the most significant flaw in my father's company, their old-fashioned system for managing the supply chain, while Brown Technologies relied on traditional relationships and manual processes. I was building something revolutionary, an AI-driven platform that could predict market demands and optimize inventory in real time, while Brown Technologies was stuck in the past with manual processes and traditional business relationships. I was creating a groundbreaking AI platform that could predict market needs and manage inventory instantly. My team grew quickly. My team expanded rapidly. I hired the brightest minds I could find, people who saw the potential in disrupting an industry stuck in the past. I recruited the most brilliant people I could find, those who believed in shaking up an industry that was behind the times. We worked out of a cramped office with questionable air conditioning, but the energy was electric. Our office was small and had a bad air conditioner, but the energy and excitement were incredible. Every day brought us closer to launching something that would change everything. Each day brought us closer to releasing a product that would completely change the industry. The first major breakthrough came 6 months in. Our prototype caught the attention of a prominent tech investor who immediately saw the potential. Our first big success happened after 6 months. Our prototype impressed a well-known tech investor who immediately recognized its potential. "This could revolutionize the entire industry," she said during our pitch meeting. "How soon can you scale? This could completely change the industry," she said at our meeting. "How quickly can you grow?" With proper funding secured, we moved fast. Once we had the funding we needed, we moved very quickly. Every weakness I'd observed in my father's company became an opportunity for innovation. I turned every flaw I had seen in my father's company into a chance for new ideas. Where Brown technologists took weeks to process orders, our system could do it in minutes. Our system could process orders in minutes, while Brown technologies took weeks. Their manual quality control became our automated perfection. We replaced their manual quality checks with our automated perfect system. Their rigid hierarchy transformed into our fluid collaboration. Their strict chain of command became our flexible teamwork. Never mentioned my connection to Brown Technologies. I never told anyone about my relationship with Brown Technologists. As far as the world was concerned, I was just another tech entrepreneur with a vision. Everyone in the world just saw me as another tech entrepreneur with a great idea. But late at night, when I reviewed our growing market share reports, I allowed myself a small smile. But late at night, when I looked at the reports showing our growing share of the market, I would allow myself a small smile. Somewhere in his mahogany office, my father was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating his daughter. My father, in his darkwood office somewhere, was about to learn a costly lesson about what happens when you don't believe in your own daughter. 18 months after my departure, my company, Novatech Solutions, had become the talk of the industry. A year and a half after I left, my company, Novatech Solutions, was the most talked about company in the industry. Our platform was revolutionizing how businesses handled their supply chains, and companies were scrambling to integrate our technology. Our platform was completely changing how companies managed their supply chains, and other businesses were rushing to use our technology. Every success felt like a personal victory, especially when I read reports about Brown Technologies struggling to keep up with the mysterious new player in the market. Each success felt like a win just for me, particularly when I read news about Brown Technologies having a hard time competing with the new unknown company in the market. I was in a board meeting when I first saw the numbers that made my heart race. During a board meeting, I saw the figures that made my heart beat faster. Brown Technologies had lost 30% of their market share in Asia, and their stock was plummeting. Brown Technologies' stock was dropping fast, and they had lost 30% of their market share in Asia. My father had always been proud of his personal touch approach to business, but in a digital age, that wasn't enough anymore. My father had always been proud of his old-fashioned personal touch business style, but in today's digital world, that was no longer sufficient. Clients wanted efficiency, not golf course handshakes. Customers cared about efficiency, not friendly chats on the golf course. Another company from Brown's portfolio dropped our competitor's system for hours. My head of sales announced proudly. That's the 5th one this quarter. Another company that was a Brown client switched from our competitor's system to ours. My head of sales declared with pride. That's 5. This quarter alone. The team erupted in applause, but I kept my expression neutral. The team started clapping loudly, but I kept a straight face. They didn't know they were celebrating my father's downfall, and I intended to keep it that way. They had no idea they were cheering for my father's failure, and I planned to keep my secret. Later that evening, as I sat in my office overlooking the Singapore skyline, my phone lit up with a message from Jacob. That night, as I sat in my office and looked at the city lights of Singapore, my phone lit up with a text from Jacob. We hadn't spoken since I left, but I wasn't surprised he was reaching out. No, we hadn't talked since I left, but I was not surprised that he was contacting me now. Dad's losing it. He wrote, "The board is pressuring him to modernize, but he won't listen. Says he won't be bullied by some upstart company." Dad is freaking out. He wrote, "The board is pushing him to update things, but he refuses. He keeps saying he won't be intimidated by some new company." I didn't respond, but I smiled at the irony. I didn't reply, but I couldn't help but smile at the situation. My father, who'd spent years bullying me into fitting his narrow view of what a daughter should be, was now being forced to change by the very person he'd dismissed. My father, who had spent years trying to force me to be the daughter he wanted, was now being forced to change by the very person he had cast aside. The satisfaction was sweeter than I'd imagined. The feeling of satisfaction was even better than I had thought it would be. The next morning brought news that sent shockwaves through our office. The next day, some news came that completely shocked everyone in our office. Brown Technologies had announced their intention to acquire promising tech startups in an aggressive expansion strategy. Brown Technologies had revealed its plans to buy tech startups in a bold move to grow the company. My father was trying to buy his way out of trouble, a classic move from his playbook. My father was using his usual strategy to get out of trouble. He was trying to buy his way out. "They'll be coming for us soon," my CFO warned during our emergency meeting. "We're too big of a threat to ignore." "They're going to come after us soon," my CFO said at our urgent meeting. "We are too much of a threat for them to ignore." She was right. She was correct. Within weeks, we received the first overture from the Brown Technologies acquisition team. A few weeks later, we got the first contact from the Brown Technologies team that handles buying other companies. The offer was generous, far more than our company was worth on paper. The offer was very generous, much more than our company's official value. My executive team was ecstatic, seeing it as validation of everything we'd built. My executive team was thrilled, seeing the offer as proof of everything we had created. "This is an incredible opportunity," Maiku argued. "We'd have the resources to scale globally overnight." "This is an amazing chance for us," Maiku said. "We would have the money and people to grow worldwide almost instantly. But I had been waiting for this moment for too long to give in now. But I had been waiting for this moment for too long to just give in." "Schedule a meeting," I told them. "I want to handle this personally." "Set up a meeting," I instructed them. "I want to be the one to deal with this myself." My team was surprised. I usually stayed out of acquisition talks, but they didn't question my decision. My team was surprised, as I usually didn't get involved in these kinds of discussions, but they didn't question me. They'd learned to trust my instincts. Even when they didn't understand them, they had learned to trust my judgment. Even when they didn't know why I was making a certain choice, little did they know I was finally ready to reveal who I really was. They had no idea that I was finally about to show them my true identity. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Later that night, I was on my balcony, watching the city lights twinkling like stars. I thought about the day I'd walked out of my father's office, about all the nights I'd spent doubting myself, wondering if I was making a mistake. I thought back to the day I left my father's office, and all the nights I had questioned myself, worried I had made the wrong choice. Now, my mistake was worth millions, and the father who'd never believed in me was about to learn exactly what he'd lost. Now, my mistake was valued at millions of dollars, and the father who had never supported me was about to realize exactly what he had given up. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Jacob. My phone vibrated again. Another text from Jacob. Dad's planning to fly to Singapore himself for the acquisition meeting. Says he needs to handle this one personally. Dad is going to fly to Singapore for the meeting himself, and he says he has to deal with this personally. Perfect, I thought, putting down my phone. It was time for a long overdue family reunion. Perfect, I thought, setting my phone down. It was time for a much-needed family gathering. The day of the meeting arrived with a tension that crackled through our modern office space. A stark contrast to my father's traditional mahogany-filled domain, a palpable tension filled our modern office on the day of the meeting, which was a clear opposite of my father's old-fashioned, wood-paneled space. I'd chosen our largest conference room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and stunning city views. I picked our biggest conference room, which had huge windows that offered an incredible view of the city. My team sat ready, tablets in hand, professional and poised. My team was sitting there, ready with their tablets, looking professional and composed, when my father walked in, flanked by his advisors. I savored the moment before he noticed me. As my father came in with his advisors, I enjoyed the moment before he saw me. He looked older, more worn than I remembered. He looked older and more tired than I recalled. Running a failing company had taken its toll. Managing a company that was struggling had clearly taken a toll on him. His eyes swept the room with the arrogant confidence I knew so well until they landed on me. Sitting calmly at the head of the table, his eyes moved around the room with his typical arrogant confidence until he saw me sitting peacefully at the head of the table. The color drained from his face. His face lost all its color. Madeline, Madeline, hello, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Please take a seat. We have a lot to discuss. Hello, Dad, I responded, my voice calm. Please sit down. We have a lot we need to talk about. His advisors exchanged confused glances as my father stood frozen in the doorway. My father's advisors looked at each other, confused, as he just stood motionless in the doorway. I could see him struggling to process what he was seeing. His daughter, the one he'd dismissed, so he's now sitting in the power position. I could tell he was trying to understand what was happening. His daughter, the one he had so easily rejected, was now in the position of power. What is this? He demanded, his shock turning to anger. What kind of game are you playing? What's the meaning of this? He asked, his shock now turning to rage. What are you doing? No game, I said, gesturing to the presentation screen behind me. Just business. Novatech Solutions is my company. I founded it, built it, and grew it into the market leader you're now desperate to acquire. This isn't a game, I said, pointing to the screen behind me. This is just business. I founded, built, and grew Novatech Solutions into the leading company you are now desperate to buy. The silence in the room was deafening. The room went completely silent. My team watched with wide eyes. This was the first time many of them were learning about my connection to Brown Technologies. My team was watching. Why do many of them were just finding out about my connection to Brown Technologies for the first time? My father's advisors were frantically whispering among themselves, likely realizing the implications of this revelation. My father's advisors were whispering quickly to each other, probably understanding what this news meant. Impossible, my father sputtered. You couldn't have. This is impossible, my father stammered. You couldn't have done this. ... What's impossible? I asked, pulling up our company's growth charts. That I created a solution that's revolutionizing the industry? Or that I did it without your help? What's impossible? I asked, putting our company's growth charts up on the screen. Is it that I created a solution that's changing the industry, or that I did it all on my own? One of his advisors cleared his throat. Miss Brown, regardless of your personal connection, we're here to discuss a serious business proposition. One of his advisors coughed a little. Ms. Brown, your personal connection aside, we are here to talk about a serious business proposal. Of course, I smiled. Let's discuss how my company has captured 40% of the market share in Asia. Or perhaps you'd like to talk about how our AI-driven platform has made your entire business model obsolete. Certainly. I smiled. Let's talk about how my company now controls 40% of the Asian market. Or maybe you'd prefer to discuss how our AI platform has made your entire business model completely outdated. My father finally found his voice. You did this to destroy me? Your own father? My father finally spoke again. You did this to ruin me. Your own father? No, I replied, my smile fading. I did this because you taught me that being a woman meant I couldn't run a company. So I built one that's better than yours. In every way. No, I answered, my smile gone. I did this because you taught me that as a woman, I couldn't run a company. So I went and built one anyway, and it's better than yours in every single way. His face reddened. Name your price, he growled. Everyone has one. His face turned red. Just tell me your price, he snarled. Everyone has one. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. That's where you're wrong, Dad. This isn't about money. It never was. This company is my legacy, the one you refused to let me build with you. I stood, smoothing my jacket. That's where you're wrong, Dad. This was never about money. This company is my legacy, the one you wouldn't let me build with you. I walked around the table until I stood directly in front of him. Your offer is declined. I walked around the table and stopped right in front of him. Your offer is not accepted. You can't do this, he said, but his voice had lost its authority. You can't do that, he said, but his voice was no longer strong. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. I saw fear in his eyes for the very first time in my life. I already have, I replied. Meeting adjourned. I already did, I said. The meeting is over. As my father stormed out of the conference room, his face red with rage and humiliation, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. As my father stormed out, his face red with anger and embarrassment. I felt a huge weight come off my shoulders. Advisors scrambled after him, leaving behind their untouched presentation folders. Sleek black binders embossed with the Brown Technologies logo I'd grown up seeing everywhere. His advisors quickly followed him, leaving their untouched presentation folders behind the same black binders with the Brown Technologies logo that I had grown up seeing everywhere. That was unexpected, my CFO said, breaking the stunned silence that had fallen over the room. You're Walter Brown's daughter? Well, that was a surprise, my CFO said, breaking the quiet. You're Walter Brown's daughter. I turned to face my team, the people who'd believed in my vision without knowing my full story. I turned to my team, the people who had believed in my idea without knowing everything about me. I am, I said, but more importantly, I'm the CEO. Who's going to take this company global? Yes, I said, but what's more important is that I am the CEO who is going to make this company a global one. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The weeks that followed were a complete blur. News of my identity leaked to the press, and suddenly every business publication wanted the story when my identity was leaked to the news. Every business magazine suddenly wanted to tell my story. Tech heiress disrupts family empire became the headline of the month. The headline, Tech heiress crushes family empire, was everywhere that month. My phone was flooded with messages old colleagues, family, friends, even my mother, all wanting to understand how the dutiful daughter had transformed into a business rival. My phone was full of messages from old coworkers, family, friends, and even my mother, all trying to understand how the obedient daughter became a business competitor. Jacob's message was the only one I read fully. I always knew you were better at this than me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. I only read Jacob's message completely. I always knew you were better at this than me. I should have told you sooner, and I am sorry that I didn't. My grandmother invited me to tea at her favorite restaurant, the same place she used to take me when I was a child. My grandmother asked me to get tea at the same restaurant she used to take me to when I was little. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she read the latest article about Novatech's success. Her eyes were full of pride as she read the most recent article about Novatech's success. Your grandfather would have loved this, she said, setting down her cup. He built that company believing innovation was more important than tradition. Your father forgot that, but you didn't. Your grandfather would have been so happy about this, she said, putting down her cup. He created that company because he believed new ideas were more important than old customs. Your father forgot that, but you remembered. Market analysts predicted that Brown Technologies would need to undergo massive restructuring to survive. Experts who study the market thought Brown Technologies would have to make huge changes to stay in business. My father, they said, was being pressured to step down. The board wanted younger leadership, someone who could modernize the company before it was too late. They said my father was being forced to quit. The board of directors wanted a younger person to be in charge, someone who could update the company before it was too late. But I no longer cared about my father's company. But I didn't care about my father's company anymore. Novatech was expanding into Europe, and we were developing new features that would revolutionize the industry even further. Novatech was growing into Europe, and we were creating new features that would change the industry even more. My team was excited, motivated, and most importantly, valued, regardless of who they were. My team was excited, motivated, and most of all, respected, no matter who they were. Late one evening, as I sat in my office reviewing expansion plans, my assistant buzzed in. "Your father is here to see you." Late one night, while I was in my office looking at plans to grow the company, my assistant called and said, "Your father is here to see you." I considered turning him away but decided against it. I thought about not seeing him, but I changed my mind. Let him see what his daughter had built without him. I wanted him to see what his daughter had accomplished on her own. He entered slowly, looking uncertain in this space that was so different from his traditional office. He came in slowly, looking unsure in a space that was so different from his old-fashioned office. "Madeline," he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. "We need to talk." "Madeline," he said, his voice not sounding as strong as it used to, "we have to talk." "About what?" I asked, not offering him a seat. "Business or family?" "What about," I asked, not inviting him to sit down, "the business or our family?" "Both," he admitted. "The board, they want you to come back to lead Brown Technologies' digital transformation." "Both?" he confessed. "The board wants you to come back and lead Brown Technologies' digital revolution." I laughed, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "You still don't get it, do you? I didn't build this company to prove something to you. I built it because I could, because I'm good at what I do. I don't need your approval anymore." I laughed, and the sound bounced off the glass wall. "You still don't understand, do you? I didn't build this company to prove anything to you. I built it because I was able to, because I am good at this. I no longer need you to approve of me." He flinched at my words, finally understanding what his actions had cost him, not just market share or company value, but a daughter who'd been ready to give him everything. He reacted to my words, finally realizing the true cost of his actions. Not just a loss of market share or company value, but a daughter who was once willing to give him her all. "You should go," I said quietly. "I have a meeting with European investors in the morning." "You should leave," I said softly. "I have a meeting with some European investors tomorrow morning." As he left, I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. After he left, I went to the window and looked at the city lights. Somewhere in those streets was a young woman being told she couldn't do something because of who she was. I hoped she'd prove them wrong out there in the city. There was probably a young woman being told she couldn't do something because of her identity. I hoped she would also show them they were wrong. The story of my overnight success became a legend in the tech world. My quick rise to success became a famous story in the tech industry. What the headlines didn't capture were the quiet victories that followed. The headlines didn't tell the story of the quiet wins that came after. Brown Technologies stock continued to plummet. As more clients switched to our platform, Brown Technologies stock kept falling as more and more clients left them for our platform. My father's board finally took action, forcing him into early humiliation he couldn't handle. My father's board of directors finally made a move and forced him to retire early. An embarrassment he couldn't deal with? He retreated to his mansion, refusing to face the industry that had once worshipped him. He went to his mansion and refused to see anyone in the industry. that had once admired him. Meanwhile, no bateksoado. At the same time, Novatech became incredibly successful. Our European expansion exceeded all projections, and our development team rolled out innovations faster than competitors could keep up. Our growth in Europe was even better than we had expected, and our development team was creating new ideas so fast that our competitors couldn't keep up. The office buzzed with energy and ideas, fostering the kind of collaborative environment I'd always dreamed of creating at Brown Technologies. The office was full of energy and new ideas, creating the kind of teamwork-focused environment I had always wanted to build at Brown Technologies. One morning, my grandmother came to visit our Singapore headquarters. One day, my grandmother came to our Singapore office for a visit, as I showed her around. Introducing her to my team and demonstrating our latest technology, she squeezed my hand, as I was showing her around, introducing her to my team and our newest technology. She squeezed my hand. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a worn leather journal. "Your grandfather's notes from when he first started the company. I have a gift for you," she said, taking out an old leather journal. "These are your grandfather's notes from when he first started the business." She opened it to a marked page, pointing to an underlined passage. "A true legacy isn't inherited. It's earned through vision and determination." She opened the journal to a page she had marked and pointed to a sentence that was underlined. "A real legacy is not given to you. You earn it with your own ideas and hard work." He wrote that the day your father joined the company, she explained. "I think he knew even then that innovation requires more than just birthright." He wrote that on the day your father started at the company, she told me. "I believe he knew even then that new ideas require more than just being born into the right family." The words hit home. Those words really resonated with me. All those years I'd fought for a place in my father's legacy, never realizing I needed to build my own. For so many years, I had fought to be a part of my father's legacy, but I didn't realize I needed to create my own. Now, standing in my own company, surrounded by people who respected me for my abilities rather than my name, I finally understood what real success felt like. Now, in my own company, with people who respected me for what I could do rather than my family name, I finally knew what true success was. The industry that had once dismissed me as Walter Brown's daughter now knew me as Madeline Brown, the innovator who transformed supply chain management. The industry that had once ignored me as Walter Brown's daughter now knew me as Madeline Brown, the person who completely changed how supply chains work. I'd earned that recognition every step of the way. I had worked hard for that respect with every step I took. 6 months after my father's retirement, Novatech hosted a global technology summit in Singapore. Half a year after my father retired, Novatech held a worldwide technology conference in Singapore. Industry leaders from around the world gathered to discuss the future of supply chain management business. Leaders from all over the world came together to talk about what's next for supply chain management. I took the stage as the keynote speaker, my grandmother beaming proudly from the front row. I was the main speaker, and my grandmother was in the front row, looking at me with a proud smile. "Innovation isn't about following traditions," I told the packed auditorium. "It's about having the courage to challenge them. New ideas aren't about doing things the old way," I told the large audience. It's about being brave enough to question them. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Everyone in the room understood the irony of what I was saying. When I announced our latest breakthrough, an upgrade that would make traditional systems like Brown Technologies completely obsolete, the auditorium erupted in applause. The auditorium filled with applause when I announced our newest breakthrough, an upgrade that would make old systems like Brown Technologies completely useless. After the summit, Jacob approached me at the reception after the conference. Jacob came up to me at the reception. He looked different, humbler, more genuine. He looked changed, more humble, more real. I sold my shares in Dad's company. He confessed, started a small sports coaching business instead. For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. I sold my shares in Dad's company, he admitted. I started a small business as a sports coach instead. I'm finally happy for the first time in my life. I smiled, realizing we'd both found freedom in different ways. I smiled, understanding that we had both found freedom in our own ways. Escaped our father's expectations by choosing his own path. While I'd conquered them by exceeding them, he had gotten away from our father's expectations by finding his own way, while I had beaten them by doing even better than he ever thought I could. My mother still sends occasional messages, trying to broker peace between my father and me. My mother still texts me sometimes, trying to get my father and me to make up. She doesn't understand that some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. She doesn't get that some relationships just can't be fixed. I've made my peace with that. Just as I've made peace with my journey, I've accepted that. Just as I've accepted my journey, these days, when young entrepreneurs ask me for advice, I tell them my real secret to success. Don't let anyone else define your worth. Now, when young business owners ask for my advice, I tell them my true secret to success. Don't let anyone else decide how valuable you are. The best revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's proving yourself right. The best revenge is not showing them they were wrong. It's showing yourself you were right. That as for my father, last I heard he spends his days in his study, surrounded by the mahogany panels that once witnessed his greatest mistake, underestimating his daughter. As for my father, the last I heard was that he spends his time in his study, surrounded by the same dark wood that once saw his biggest error, not believing in his own daughter. Sometimes the most expensive lessons are the ones we learn too late. Sometimes the most costly lessons are the ones we learn when it is too late.